What do I have for lunch?
It's like potato. Baked potato. Talking baked potato.
Sontaran! Sontaran! Sonta ha! Sonta ha! Hello, Whovians, and welcome to my latest Doctor Who review, where today I review the 192nd Doctor Who story, the first two-part story of Series 4 of the new series, the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poison Sky, written by Helen Raynor, starring David Tennant as the 10th Doctor. So the plot is as follows. 52 people across the world in 11 different time zones die at the exact same time. The only connection? They all have Atmos installed in their vehicles. Martha Jones, now a unit medic, summons the 10th Doctor back to modern-day Earth to help figure out why, but an old enemy lies in wait. Okay, so the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poison Sky. How is it? Well, I've made no secret of the fact in my previous classic reviews that I'm not a huge fan of the Sontarans, and I stand by that, I'm afraid. As for this story, I think it's decent, but I don't really think it's great. To be honest, this is one of the weakest stories in Series 4. Not that it's bad, but there's so many others that are just better than this. I like the idea of the story. The concept of it is really quite clever, with the whole idea about Atmos, the sat-navs being installed in the cars, and the idea of the Sontarans gassing the Earth, and it kind of it's a good statement about global warming and sort of our resources and how we use our emissions and everything. I think the message of the story is very good, and it is wonderful to have UNIT back in full force. We did see them briefly in Series 1 with Christopher Eccleston, but it was very brief. It was in Aliens of London. This is a story where units are heavily involved, and it's a great way to reintroduce Martha as well. Martha Jones returns as a unit medical officer. She is, well, she's kind of a soldier as well, but she's a fully qualified doctor now, a medical doctor. She is there investigating what's going on, and she calls the Doctor to come and help. And I really liked seeing the reunion between the Doctor and Martha. That was a lovely moment, and it turns out Martha has moved on with her life now, obviously, as I've said, career-wise, but also she is engaged to Tom Milligan, who we saw in Last of the Time Lords. And of course, Donna and Martha meet each other, and the Doctor is expecting them to not get along, but it turns out they actually get along just fine, and there's some great humour at the beginning with Donna and Martha, which is he skinny? No, he's actually kind of strong. He is too skinny for words. If you try and hug him, you get a paper cut. I love that so much. There's great banter between Donna and Martha, just really, really good. But for me, the reason why I'm not so keen on the Sontarans is because, well, they're just soldiers. That's all they are. There's nothing much to them. And obviously, I alluded to this in my sketch at the beginning, but they're just potato heads. They're the space potatoes. That's basically what they are. And I just don't find them threatening. If anything, they're kind of not silly, but they're just kind of bland. Much like the Silurians, they're just kind of soldiers, and they thrive on the concept of war, and they embellish in it. But to be quite honest, this story was sort of boring in places. I think I enjoyed this one a lot more as a kid, because watching it now, I think the story's too long. I think perhaps this should have been one part and not two. I appreciate that Russell T Davies wanted to bring them back the Sontarans back in such a big way, but to me, this story drags quite a lot. I think it's the fact that I don't engage with the Sontarans, and I just don't think there's enough here in the story to warrant a two-part runtime. I really don't. And I think the ending is kind of abrupt when the Doctor just shoots something up into the sky that clears the gas. It just seems very convenient, to be honest. It seems like they kind of rushed through the ending. I also like the fact that we go back to Unit, but at the same time, I do miss the Brigadier. They do reference him, which is nice. Obviously, Nicholas Courtney was far too unwell to appear in this story. Even if he appeared in a cameo, that would have been quite nice. But oh well, it's one of those nitpicks. But I do think that it would have been awesome to see David Tennant interact with Nicholas Courtney. That would have been an amazing dynamic. As for the character of Colonel Mace, he's no Brigadier. He's no Alistair Lethbridge Stewart, but he'll do. You know, he's okay. He's serviceable for what the story requires, but I don't think his interactions with the Doctor really compare to the Doctor and the Brig in the classic series, to be quite honest, but he's alright. The performances are really cool. I think David Tennant is great in this one. He's quite funny. He's got a lot of great humour. And I love that scene when he's talking to the Sontarans on the hologram, and then he switches them and he turns to the cartoon channel, which is kind of funny. It's nice to see Freema Agyeman come back as Martha. She gets to do quite a bit, actually, because they clone Martha. The Sontarans are growing this embryo inside Unit, and they actually use a clone of Martha to infiltrate the NATO systems and to stop a launch from happening. Freema Agyeman technically is playing two parts in this, which I think is interesting, and she's playing good Martha and evil Martha, well, basically. There's actually a scene when the two of them interact at the very end, which is actually surprisingly heartfelt and emotional. It's interesting how the real Martha is comforting the clone of Martha when she's dying. I think that's a really surprisingly emotive moment. Speaking of emotion, we also get Donna. Catherine Tate as Donna. She's also very good. She gets to go back to her family this time, and we see more family drama with Donna, Wilfred, and Sylvia. She discovers that Wilfred and Sylvia have actually met the Doctor before. Obviously, Sylvia met the Doctor in The Runaway Bride, and Wilfred met the Doctor in Voyage of the Damned. So it's a really interesting reunion at that point. Wilfred is very much in support of Donna, and I love that. It's just so cute, the fact that he is supportive of her and he wants her to go and see the world and travel with the Doctor, and he really looks up to the Doctor. Like, Wilfred's admiration for the Doctor is something I just love about Series 4, and obviously going into the specials, which will follow Series 4. I think it's just brilliant. But obviously Sylvia is not supportive of it at first, and then Wilfred says, you know what, we'll keep it a secret between you and me, but you go and see the world and travel with that wonderful man. I just love the relationship between Donna and Wilfred. It's brilliant. And I like the fact that when Donna comes back, we see flashbacks of the previous episodes, and she's thinking about all the things that she's seen. It's just, it's a very poignant moment. It's like she's coming back to real life, and it's almost weird to think how no one would believe anything she saw, and the perception of what she saw completely changes her mind when she comes back. It's like, oh my god, wow! I think it's just coming to terms with the idea. I also like the character of Luke Rattigan, who's this American child genius. Although he is deceived by the Sontarans, which is interesting. As for his character, he's alright. I mean, I don't know exactly what they promised him. They promised him some kind of fall of the earth in this brave new world or something, and I think he wanted to be the first human to sort of discover that. I don't know. He was lied to. They only wanted him for the Atmos installation. I don't think that warrants him to go and cry. I thought maybe some of his performance traits were a bit over the top. Like when he comes back after they're about to execute him, he teleports back to his academy, and then he starts crying. I just didn't buy that. I thought that was corny. And the moment when he gets the gun out and points the gun at his fellow students, I know it's supposed to signify that Luke has gone insane by this point, but it just felt corny. Like, the way the actor performed it was over the top. I almost laughed at it when he's like, I'm clever than you! I'm clever! I don't know. To me, he was overacted. It was completely overacted, but Not a bad performance, but at the same time, hard to really believe, to be honest. I did quite like the scene, though, when the Doctor threw the gun away from him. That was pretty funny. And then Luke's sacrifice at the very end is powerful. I'll give it that. It's a very good ending to the story when he saves the Doctor's life, which I appreciate. And there's some great comedy as well, like when the Doctor and Ross go to see Luke in his academy, and then they encounter General Stahl, and then they have to drive away, and then the Jeep's about to drive into the river, and then they get out the Jeep, and then it just, there's a few sparks, and then the Doctor's like, oh, was that it? As for the villains, I mean, General Stahl, he's alright, and same with Commander Score, like, they're okay, like, I mean, the design is cool, I suppose, like, the armour looks good, and the heads look kind of interesting, and the actors perform them well, but they're just soldiers. They're just baked potato soldiers. I'm sorry, I can't get into the Sontarans. I like some of their stories in the classic series, don't get me wrong as well. I like their stories, they're entertaining, but they're just not my favourite villains of Doctor Who, to be honest. I can't get into them as much as other people, and their chants, the Sontaha, Sontaha, kind of gets a little repetitive after a while. It's like, Russell, you have to give every villain a chant, you know? It doesn't need to be quite like that. I just don't understand, what does the Doctor do that actually saves the day? Like, he clears the gas by shooting something up into the sky, and he just whips it up that quickly. It's a bit like New Earth, when he finds a cure for every single disease, and he whips it up within seconds. It's like it just doesn't make sense. I don't know how that, unless I missed something, but I just don't know how the Doctor created something so quickly in Luke's academy, and then bam, he shoots it up into the sky. Yeah, I don't know. And there's also a good scene when Donna's on the Sontaran ship, and she has to sneak around and get to the teleport pod, and she's using the mallet to whack the back of the Sontaran's neck, because they have like a probic vent, which is their weakness. I do appreciate the scale of this story, the fact that it is like a worldwide thing, like the choking gas and you know, the Atmos and everything. I think it is a really good story in terms of stakes, but ultimately for me, it's got a lot of flaws, and I think it should have been one part. I think it's just too long. It drags at 2 parts, and I just couldn't get into it as much as the other ones, but I still like it. I think it's pretty solid for what it is, and it's great to have Martha back, of course. I will never say no to Martha, but and there's so much emotional drama with Donna as well. Speaking of Martha and Donna, as well as the comedy, there is a great scene when she's saying to her, you know, do your family know everything? And Donna's like, not really, no. And then she says to her, just make sure they know and that they're safe, because if you stand too close to the Doctor, you might get burned. It's a very poignant moment, because obviously we know Martha's family in the previous series were really badly affected by her travelling with the Doctor. So I think Donna just wanted to go and visit her family to make sure that they were okay and that they knew she was safe, which is interesting, I think. And it's a very poignant moment as well, and it shows as well that Donna's realised that people have travelled with this man before, and it's kind of dangerous as well. So harks back to Partners in Crime when the Doctor says, last time with Martha it was very complicated. So I think Donna doesn't want to stop travelling, but she's just very wary of the potential consequences of such dangerous travelling. But she's not going to give it up, not for a second. So for me, this is a good story. I just don't think it's amazing. So I think I will give the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poison Sky an 8 out of 10. It's a pretty good comeback for the Sontarans, and it's a pretty good entry for them in the new series, but again, I'm sorry, I just can't invest in them as villains. Like I said, they're the science fiction version of baked potatoes. They do look a bit silly in that regard, I suppose, but still, it's an entertaining one to watch, and I quite like it. So that's it. That's my review of the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poison Sky. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned next time when I review The Doctor's Daughter, which will be a very interesting episode to review, given the real-life marriage of David Tennant and Georgia Moffat. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'm Mr. Tarnus11. See you soon. Bye for now.